Something has just happened inside the federal government that should alarm anyone who believes institutions still matter. This is not a gossip leak. This is not anonymous speculation. This is not a partisan talking point. This is an internal rupture, documented, confirmed, and now impossible to contain. What you are about to hear is the resignation that shattered the illusion of loyalty at the highest level of presidential protection. It is the moment when the United States Secret Service, an agency built on discipline, silence, and obedience to law, decided it had reached its limit. Breaking developments out of the Department of Homeland Security confirm what insiders had been quietly warning about for weeks. The Secret Service is in open crisis. On Tuesday afternoon, January 20th, 2026, at 3:42 p.m. Eastern Time, the acting director of the United States Secret Service submitted her resignation to the Secretary of Homeland Security. Her name is Kimberly Cheadle, a 30-year veteran of the agency, a career professional, not a political appointee, not a media figure, not a provocateur. The resignation letter wasn't dramatic. That's what made it terrifying. No grandstanding, no political flourish, just a blunt explanation written by someone who understands exactly how words live forever. Irreconcilable differences with the president over the scope and legality of orders I was being pressured to carry out. Read that again. This wasn't a policy dispute. This wasn't a personality clash. This was the head of presidential protection saying in writing that she was being pushed to do things she believed were illegal. That sentence alone should stop you cold, because this isn't some mid-level official quietly rotating out. This is the person responsible for the physical safety of the president, someone whose entire career is built on obedience, discipline, and silence, choosing to walk away in the middle of a crisis. People like that don't resign lightly, they don't resign publicly, and they definitely don't resign over irreconcilable differences unless the line has already been crossed, and it didn't stop with her. Almost immediately, senior agents began requesting transfers off the presidential detail. Not retirements, not promotions, transfers, the kind you ask for when you need distance, when staying where you are starts to feel professionally or legally dangerous. Inside Secret Service headquarters, the conversation shifted, quietly, behind closed doors, in hallways where people spoke in lowered voices and checked who was listening before finishing a sentence. Agents began asking a question that almost never gets asked out loud. Are we allowed to do this? Not should we. Not is this wise. Can we legally comply with what the president is asking? That question is radioactive inside a protection agency, because once it's asked, trust is already gone. Multiple sources inside the agency, speaking only on condition of anonymity, describe what followed as a collapse in morale. Not a dip, a collapse. Veteran agents stopped volunteering for sensitive assignments. Briefings grew tense. Orders were followed mechanically, stripped of the quiet confidence that normally defines the service. The bond between the president and the people sworn to protect him began to fray, and that bond is everything. Presidential protection isn't just about weapons and formations, it's about absolute trust. Trust that orders are lawful, that leadership won't put agents in impossible positions, that the mission is clear and legitimate. Once that trust breaks, the system doesn't fail loudly, it unravels. Agents start documenting everything, conversations get shorter, decisions get deferred. Every order is mentally checked, not just for risk, but for liability. And here's the part that should really worry you. When the Secret Service begins quietly questioning legality, it means internal guardrails are already straining. These are not impulsive people. They are trained to absorb pressure, to operate under chaos, to remain loyal even when circumstances are ugly. If they are hesitating, the pressure didn't just cross a line. It bulldozed through it. No press conference announced this breakdown. No official statement acknowledged it. But the signals were there, unmistakable to anyone who knows how these institutions work. A resignation that shouldn't happen. Transfers that don't get requested. Questions that aren't supposed to be asked. Together they tell a single story. Something was being demanded that the system itself could not safely carry. And when the people tasked with protecting the president start worrying about protecting themselves from legal exposure, from ethical breach, from future accountability, that's not just an internal personnel issue. That's a warning sign. Because power doesn't collapse when it's challenged from the outside. It collapses when the people holding it up decide they can't anymore. And here's the heart of the storm. Secret Service agents, elite professionals sworn to protect the president, are now being asked to do something they were never trained to do. They are being asked to physically prevent state law enforcement from carrying out lawful court orders, to stand in the way of sheriffs entering Trump properties, to choose between their oath to protect the president and their oath to uphold the Constitution. Let that sink in. This tension has been simmering for months, quietly, tightly, beneath the surface of briefings and protocols, but the New York asset seizure crisis lit the fuse. These agents are trained to take a bullet for the president. They are trained to neutralize threats, to react under fire, to safeguard life. They are not trained to obstruct justice. They are not trained to become a personal militia in a legal battle against state governments. And now they are saying no. This is not disloyalty. This is not rebellion. This is professional resistance. They are drawing a line, a legal, ethical, moral line, and refusing to cross it, because loyalty in the Secret Service is measured differently than in politics. It is measured by oaths kept, laws honored, integrity maintained. When agents refuse, it is not a failure of discipline. It is proof that the system of protection still functions, not for a person, but for the office, for the Constitution, for the country. And that refusal, it is seismic. It signals a breakdown in the chain of command. It signals that a president, regardless of rank, power, or influence, can no longer assume obedience. When the people whose job is to shield the leader begin to question the legality of orders, the crisis isn't hypothetical. It's real, immediate, dangerous. This is not about politics. It is about the limits of power, the boundaries of authority, and the courage of professionals willing to protect the law above all else. And right now, those limits are being tested like never before. And here's the question America has never had to confront. What happens when a president loses the loyalty of his own protective detail? To understand the gravity of the situation, you need to look at what unfolded over the past 2 weeks. This is not speculation. It is a chain of events that pushed the Secret Service to the brink. The crisis began on Monday, January 12th, when the New York Attorney General's office formally notified the Secret Service that state officials would need access to Trump Tower, the purpose, to inventory commercial assets as part of a court-ordered receivership. Now consider what Trump Tower represents under presidential protection. Since the start of Trump's tenure, the building has been fully controlled by the Secret Service. It isn't just a residence, it is a fortified compound, hardened against threats, treated as a sensitive and secure location. Every entrance is controlled, every visitor is vetted, classified communications infrastructure is in place. This is a fortress, not a condo. And yet here comes the state executing lawful orders, and suddenly the president is demanding that his own protective agents physically block them. The situation escalated quickly. Trump called in the acting director of the Secret Service, Kimberly Cheadle, for a meeting in the Oval Office. According to sources present, Trump demanded that agents prevent New York law enforcement from entering the building. He argued that the building, because it housed the president, qualified as federal property and thus was beyond the reach of state authority. He suggested that any entry could compromise security and classified systems. Cheadle pushed back. She reminded the president that the Secret Service's mandate is to protect the president personally, not his business interests. She explained that they cannot obstruct lawful court orders executed by state officials. This wasn't negotiation, this was a legal reality. But Trump did not relent. Over the following week, he attempted a different approach. He began contacting senior agents directly, bypassing the chain of command, testing whether their loyalty was to him personally or to the law. Some reported these interactions. Others, disturbed by the pressure, requested transfers off the presidential detail. By Friday, January 16th, Cheadle realized the situation was spiraling. She confronted Trump again. She warned him that his insistence on bending the Secret Service to personal will was destroying morale and compromising the agency's integrity. Sources say the exchange was heated, with Trump accusing Cheadle of disloyalty and threatening to replace her with someone who would follow orders without question. The weekend of January 18th, 19th only deepened the crisis. Trump met with former military and law enforcement advisors in Mar-a-Lago, discussing the possibility of forming a private security force to circumvent the Secret Service if they refused to act. The idea of a parallel private army outside official oversight was the final straw. On Tuesday, January 20th at 3:42 p.m., Cheadle submitted her resignation to the Secretary of Homeland Security, citing irreconcilable differences over the legality of Trump's demands. She walked away from 3 decades of service, leaving the Secret Service at a crossroads. This is unprecedented. Never before in American history has a sitting president faced such open resistance from the very professionals sworn to protect him. The resignation signals more than a personnel change. It is a clear warning that the institutions designed to safeguard the presidency are under strain. Trump's actions forced agents into an impossible choice: loyalty to a person or loyalty to the Constitution. And in choosing the Constitution, they are not disloyal. They are defending the integrity of the office itself. The consequences are immediate and far-reaching. Presidential security may continue day to day, but the chain of command is broken. Strategic planning is compromised, morale is shattered, and the president now faces a future where his personal security could be thinner, more vulnerable, and legally constrained. This is not a warning. This is a crisis unfolding in real time. And the question remains, what happens next when the protectors refuse to be used as instruments of personal power? The country is about to find out. But here is the key distinction the president refused to accept. Trump Tower is not federal property. It is not immune from state court orders. And the Secret Service's mandate is clear. Protect the president's person, not his business interests. When the New York Sheriff's Office announced they would execute the seizure order, Trump erupted. According to multiple accounts, he summoned Acting Director Cheadle to the Oval Office and demanded that the Secret Service physically block state law enforcement from entering the building. He argued fiercely. He claimed the tower was effectively federal because he lived there. He insisted that state officials had no authority. He equated protecting the president with protecting his property. Cheadle stood her ground. She told him no. She explained that the Secret Service does not have the legal authority to obstruct lawful state court orders. Their control over access is limited to security reasons when the president is present. They can secure the building against threats, screen visitors, and protect communications, but they cannot block law enforcement from executing judicial orders in commercial spaces, even if the president disagrees. Trump pressed. He tried to frame it as a national security issue, but Cheadle's response was precise. The law does not bend to personal definition. The Secret Service's mission is not negotiable. Protecting the president's life is the mandate. Shielding his business from judicial scrutiny is not. Sources inside the agency describe an atmosphere of tension and disbelief. Agents were caught in the middle, witnessing a constitutional clash unfold in real time. They were being asked to choose between their oath to the president and their oath to the Constitution. And that is the heart of the crisis. The president was treating the Secret Service like a personal militia, expecting them to enforce his interpretation of law rather than the law itself. Cheadle's refusal and her insistence on lawful limits set the stage for what would become an unprecedented revolt inside the agency, forcing resignations and sparking a morale crisis that reverberates to this day. Trump pressed harder. He demanded she find a legal theory. He suggested invoking national security. He suggested claiming classified equipment would be compromised. He suggested declaring the entire building a restricted federal zone. Cheadle refused again. She told him plainly, "What you are asking is illegal." She reminded him that Secret Service agents swear an oath to the Constitution, not to the president personally, and she warned him that if he persisted, she would resign. Trump backed off temporarily, but he did not stop. Over the next week, he went around her. He began making direct appeals to senior agents on his detail, asking them individually whether they would stand in front of doors, whether they would block sheriffs, whether their loyalty was to him or to bureaucratic rules. Some agents reported these conversations immediately. Others were disturbed enough to request transfers. By Friday, January 16th, Cheadle confronted him again. This time, the exchange was explosive. She accused him of undermining the agency. She warned that he was destroying morale. She told him he was forcing agents into an impossible position, a legal and ethical bind no trained officer should have to navigate. Trump didn't take it well. He accused her of disloyalty. He invoked the deep state, painting a narrative of enemies within. He threatened to fire her and replace her with someone who understands the president's needs, someone who would bend the agency to his will, regardless of legality or precedent. The meeting ended without resolution. Tension lingered. Frustration simmered. Trust had begun to fracture irreparably. Then came the weekend. Trump retreated to Mar-a-Lago, where he convened a private meeting with former military and law enforcement associates from his personal circle. These were not government officials, not bound by oaths, yet they had his ear. According to insiders, the discussion turned to creating a private security force, a loyal cadre funded by the Trump Organization or supporters to protect his properties from seizure and enforce his personal directives if the Secret Service refused. When word of this plan reached Secret Service leadership, it was the final straw. The idea of a sitting president building a parallel security apparatus outside the chain of command is unprecedented in American history. It raises questions about accountability, legality, and the potential for confrontation with state authorities. By Tuesday, January 20th, Cheadle submitted her resignation to the Secretary of Homeland Security. Her letter cited irreconcilable differences over the legality of presidential orders. She explained she could not continue to serve a president who sought to undermine her agency and create his own private army. The resignation was accepted immediately, sending shockwaves through Washington. The message was clear. The Secret Service would not be turned into a personal militia. They would not violate the law, no matter the personal pressures from the president. And the breakdown of trust was now complete, a crisis unprecedented in the history of the presidency. While at Mar-a-Lago, Trump met privately with former military and law enforcement figures from his informal advisory circle, none of whom currently hold government positions. According to briefings later shared with Secret Service leadership, Trump discussed creating a private security force to supplement or replace the Secret Service, a force he would control, funded privately, loyal to him personally. When word of that plan reached agency leadership, it ended the discussion. A sitting president contemplating a parallel security force outside the federal chain of command is not just alarming, it is unprecedented. By Tuesday morning, Cheadle resigned. Her resignation was accepted immediately. And when that news leaked, it sent a signal across the federal government. The rupture is complete. The Secret Service is not alone. The FBI has been in quiet resistance for months. The Department of Justice is fractured. Career officials across Homeland Security are preparing exit strategies. What makes this moment uniquely dangerous is not just Trump's behavior, it's what happens operationally when leadership collapses. Presidential protection continues day to day. The agents are professionals, protocols remain in place, but long-term planning, coordination, morale, and trust erode rapidly. If even 10% of the Presidential Protective Division transfers or resigns, coverage thins, risk rises. Trump's solution, private contractors, only deepens the danger. Private security has no federal authority. They cannot obstruct law enforcement. They cannot claim immunity. They answer only to whoever pays them. If private contractors clash with state officials, arrests will follow. Lawsuits will follow, chaos will follow. This is how parallel power structures form. This is how democratic systems fracture, not in one dramatic moment, but through loyalty tests, legal defiance, and personalized force. Watch what happens next. Who is appointed acting director? Whether agents quietly leave, whether armed contractors appear at Trump properties, whether sheriffs are blocked, whether Congress intervenes. And watch Trump's language. When a leader starts attacking the institutions designed to protect him and praising forces he personally controls, that is not strength, that is fear. The Secret Service did not betray the president. They upheld their oath. The president betrayed the system by demanding they abandon theirs. And when the people trained to stand between a president and a bullet decide they cannot stand behind him anymore, that is not a security story. That is an end-stage warning. History suggests Trump will not de-escalate. He never has. The only question left is whether the institutions he is testing are strong enough to stop what comes next.